The name of the book is Fractured Bliss. Sree Padma joins us. She is the author of this book. And we're going to go into what it's about and what you can expect picking up this book as a reader. And it's really exciting stuff. So Sree, thanks for coming on and tell us what motivated you to write the book.
Thanks, Kate, for having me. My fascination for Sri Lanka, a beautiful island in the Indian Ocean, was the motivation to write Fractured Bliss. I've been visiting Sri Lanka since 1994, first as a visitor and later as the administrator of a study abroad program for American undergraduate students. Running the program during the time of civil war in Sri Lanka required me to learn many aspects of the island, including its politics. My extended visits also gave me a chance to form relationships with Sri Lankans, share their concerns, and listen to their life stories. The more I learned about the island and its people, the more intriguing it has become. It was hard for me to calibrate how these sweet Sri Lankans, who are very helpful by nature, can be a cause for bloody acts of violence. This calibration and contemplation is what I have attempted in this book.
Yeah, so along those same lines, give us more about Fractured Bliss. What's it about?
Fractured Bliss is about a Sri Lankan woman of a mixed racial origins, an Eurasian with the name Mary. She grows up as an orphan at a time when the island was transitioning from colonial rule to independence. Mary's origins, the tensions arising from her choice of love and marriage, her changing religious identities more than once, represent a slice of the emerging ethnic complexity on the island. Mary witnesses many tragedies that occur in independent Sri Lanka. They take the form of uprisings and the government's brutal suppression of them, the ethnic riots between the majority Sinhalese and the minority Tamils, and the rise of a rebel group and its terror tactics. These events coincide with Mary's own experiences and struggles. Essentially, Mary, by regaling her story, shows the interconnectedness of her life with that of the island's history, spanning between World War II and the end of the Sri Lankan Civil War in 2009. Embracing different religions or rejecting them at different points in her life, Mary also gives insights into the social and political significance of Sri Lankan religious practices, such as Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam.
Wow. Boy, that takes you in a lot of interesting places, certainly with Mary. What was the best part for you in writing the book, and did you learn something you didn't know?
The best part of writing this book is correlating historical events with their nitty-gritty details with the protagonist's life events. In the process, I ended up learning the details of many aspects of Sri Lankan life that I never would have been exposed otherwise. I will illustrate a couple of examples through quotes from the Fractured Bliss. The first one is Mary discussing her mother's ancestry. The excerpts come from pages 7 and 8. She came from a burgher family. Burghers are Eurasians who trace one line of their roots either to the Portuguese, the Dutch, or the British. Each of these three European groups stayed on for about a century and a half. Credit goes to Afonso de Albuquerque, whose intention was to populate Asia with Portuguese blood. He pursued his objective with a crusader's zeal. So, by the beginning of the 17th century, Portuguese men were free to marry native women in their Asian colonies. In Ceylon, or Sri Lanka, the Portuguese drew their wives both from the Sinhala majority and the Tamil minority communities. When the Dutch came to the island, usurping power from the Portuguese, they scoffed with disdain at the mixed breed that the Portuguese had sired. With the pride of victory over the Portuguese, they decided not to commit the same mistake by mixing with the inferior natives. Like everything, as time passed, their pride waned too. When the Dutch dwindled in numbers, however, they had to eat their own words. The arrival of the British as new colonial masters at the end of the 18th century put the Dutch burghers in their place. At least this was the sentiment of the Portuguese mix, who were happy to treat the Dutch mix as their equals. Here is the next quote. So, they quickly learned English, the official language of their British colonial rulers. With European blood running in their veins, they were already qualified to better assist the British than the natives. Their attempts were not futile because their thought process was on the same plane as that of the British, who generously allotted the burghers a status just a step below their own and above the indigenous Sinhalese, Tamils, and Muslims. There was more to this. Inspired by the loyalty of Portuguese and Dutch burghers and their reverence for their European ancestry, the British busied themselves by adding their own pool of genes into the native populations. A second example is about an outfit with Marxist leanings called JVP and its activities in the town of Kandy. Kandy is considered as a cultural capital of Sri Lanka. There was no published information about JVP's activities specific to Kandy. So I had to find right people to gather information. And of course, this allowed me to understand the workings of an outfit at its local level. Here I quote a couple of excerpts on page 150. On that evening, I took Joshua to the market to buy groceries. When the gunshots were heard, everybody rushed out of the market building. When I hurried outside, I saw a sea of heads coming from different directions. I heard some people asking, "What's happening?" and others answering, "The JVP is coming into the town." People were scared. They wanted to get home, but got confused as to which direction they were running in. I ran toward home, holding Joshua tightly in my hands. I ran only as fast as Joshua could run. Here is the second quote. Knowing the schools and universities were infested with JVP followers, the government closed them indefinitely. When the university was closed down and curfew was implemented, there was no transport for the students to get home. Many stranded students, fearing the police, went into Hantana Mountains and lived on wild fruits and streams until they were sure that it was safe to come down and go home. All educational institutions were closed for 6 months. The JVP followers who were in prison educated each other. The educated leaders taught others. Even some professors from Peradeniya University volunteered and went to Bogambara prison in Kandy to teach these young men, most of whom were university students. So, while university students were treated as prisoners who were interrogated regularly, after the close down of universities, prisons turned into educational institutions.
Wow. So we're almost out of time. We have hardly any time left. What do you want readers to take away from reading your book? It sounds like to be educated on Sri Lanka.
I hope that this book will inform the readers that the story, though fascinating and sound exotic, is not just about a minority woman or an island nation that is far away from the American continent. But it can be about anybody and any part of the world.
That's a perfect place to end this because we're out of time. Fractured Bliss, Sree Padma, quickly, your Facebook group. How do we get there?
Sree Padma Holt.
Excellent. You can pick up the book on Amazon. Sree, thanks.
Oh, thank you, Kate.